2 weeks ago, Nigeria celebrated our 53rd independence anniversary. I was already in primary school during the first independence anniversary. It is impossible to forget the jollof rice and meat pieces of meat served to all students that day. Not to talk of the souvenirs that were given to us in commemoration of our national freedom. Nigeria was born in a continent whose history was and perhaps still is marred by the harrowing experience of slavery and subjugation. So everyone rejoiced because of the great promise that surrounded the birth of this nation. Neighbors trooped in with congratulatory messages. Well-wishers from the locality and beyond took part in the fanfare that accompanied her birth. Although she was not the first child to be born in Africa, as a few promising children have been born before her, yet her destiny, as designed by her progenitors and attested to by the Commonwealth, as well as faraway lands, was remarkably unique. Many saw her as that child who will spearhead the total liberation and indeed the greatness of the continent. True to her perceived destiny, Nigeria began to demonstrate such leadership traits from childhood. However, neglected by those given responsibility for her nurturing, violated by those who ought to have protected her, plundered by those in whose trust she was kept, I better use the word raped. Her growth stunted, her development arrested, her heart broken, her soul crushed. And right now, this 53-year-old child is in the throes of despair and confined to the intensive care unit of the universe. Many who celebrated her birth and anticipated her great destiny now doubt her chances of survival in the next 2 years and have laid out epitaphs in preparation for what they expect to be the inglorious end of a wasted destiny. Such is the story of our country, Nigeria, a nation whose birth brought hope to Africa. Indeed, prelude to Nigeria's independence, hopes were high and expectations were huge as the world awaited the lowering of the Union Jack and the hoisting of the green-white grain to mark the entrance onto the world stage of what pundits expected to become the foremost Negro state of the continent. International tabloids headlined the events that heralded Nigeria's independence in words like, "Huge new African state is taking shape. Biggest African state nears freedom." October 1, 1960 eventually saw the birth of a very promising and well-respected independent Nigerian state. Those who are well over 53 and who witnessed and could intelligently relate to or even participate in the transition process from colonial rule to self-governance will attest to the great promise that Nigeria held as a nation at independence. For those who were not born then or who were too young to fully appreciate the significance of the events that surrounded Nigeria's entrance into the community of independent nations and the magnitude of expectations and goodwill the newborn nation attracted from all over the world, and look at the archives will be of help. As it handed administration over to Nigeria, the United Kingdom, in a government-sponsored film titled Nigeria, The Making of a Nation, described Nigeria as a land of history and pageantry, of modern thought and modern progress, whose story is an outstanding example of an ordered progress towards independence. He remarked that the last elements of British administration have been withdrawn and a great new nation emerges. Back then, a nation of 35 million people who have put their faith in the democratic line and whose voice will command respect throughout Africa, the Commonwealth, and the world. Such was Nigeria's status in the world. Barely had she attained independence when Francophone African colonies approached power to be their voice to the United Nations. This high standing of the newborn nation did not escape the notice and respect of the world's most powerful nations at the time, including the United States of America. Sometime last year, I watched a video obtained from the Library of Congress in the United States. It was a video of the official visit of Prime Minister Tafawa Balewa to the United States after independence, as powerful nations courted the friendship of this new entrant into the community of nations. As I saw the great respect accorded the Nigerian Prime Minister, as was being taken on a grand tour of the United States, and as he gallantly addressed the U.S. Congress, I wept, seeing what height Nigeria had fallen from. I wept not merely because the world's perception of Nigeria has changed for the worse, for I recognize that our burden is much more than an international image gone sour. I wept not merely because of our subsequent leaders, for the most part, have been neither as intelligent nor as eloquent as those that led and represented us at independence. For I know that our challenge is much more than the absence of intellect and oratory in leadership. I wept not just because Nigerians visiting other countries are now presumed guilty until proven innocent, as fraud and the Nigerian passport have become synonymous. I wept because I saw a great dream lying in ruins. I wept because the state of the nation is a far cry from the dreams of our founding fathers. I wept because the pillars erected by the founding fathers, the values upon which this nation was founded, are broken down. The founding fathers of our country laid the foundation of the Nigerian state through agitations, conflicts, dialogues, negotiations, and concessions. These statesmen designed the structural, constitutional, institutional, and governmental blueprint that became the foundation upon which the nation was built. Through visionary and selfless leadership, astute organization, and people-driven service that produced competitive regional development, the founding fathers became the pillars upon which the nation rested. But 53 years later, these frameworks are nothing but rubble. Right from the days of our founding fathers, the gangrene of corruption began to infest the polity, and sectional interests tore the fabrics of nationhood. The pillars of democratic governance were demolished by the military, and the cornerstone of our collective existence was shaken by forces of balkanization. Years later, having toiled through decades of military subjugation and eventual civil rule, the nation still lies in dilapidation, with security blown away by winds of violence, with poverty plaguing the land, and lives and property becoming prey to banditry, with justice cast afar off, and integrity becoming a stranger in the land, while impunity and corruption remain comfortably seated in high places. Any rebuilding process must visit the very foundation. And I must admit that a lot has been said of how our founding fathers sowed the seeds for the woes that have plagued our nation from the late pre-independence era till date. Critics make reference to utterances and actions attributed to some of these leaders. And I want to expose it all in a few minutes. For instance, Tafawa Balewa, many years before his visit to America, while addressing the Legislative Council in 1948, reportedly said, since 1914, the British government has been trying to make Nigeria into one country, but the Nigerian people are historically different in their backgrounds, in their religious beliefs and customs, and do not show themselves any sign of willingness to unite. Nigerian unity is only a British invention. It's an artificial creation of the British. Chief Obafemi Awolowo earlier, in 1948, in his book Path to Nigerian Freedom, 1946, argued that Nigeria is not a nation, it's a mere geographical expression. There are no Nigerians in the same sense as there are English, Welsh, or French. The word Nigerian is a merely distinctive appellation to distinguish those who live within the boundaries of Nigeria and those who do not. Sir Modu Bello, as reported in the now defunct newspaper The Parrot on October 12, 1960, and quarter years later, in this day, October 1, 2012, said, the new nation called Nigeria should be an estate of our grandfather, Usman Danfodio. We must ruthlessly prevent a change of power. We use the minorities in the north as willing tools and the south as a conquered territory, and never allow them to have control over their future. Considering all this, one might wonder what dreams and what pillars of our founding fathers now lie in ruins and are worth weeping for, as it does not appear from these statements that our country's founders had any faith in a Nigerian nation. However, to appreciate the foundations they laid, we must understand that the founding of nations, however implemented by human instrument, is not the product of human orchestration. God is the true architect of nations. He founds them on precepts communicated to human agents as concepts, which in many cases, however, suffer misconception as transcendental and transformational ideals are tainted with the perceptions, interpretations, interests, aspirations, as well as doubts and fears of the receptors. Therefore, I strongly believe that when the Europeans sat at the Berlin Conference 75 years before Nigeria's independence to partition Africa, the invisible hand of the Creator dictated the apportioning of all the ethnic nationalities that today constitute Nigeria to the British. I believe strongly that the amalgamation of the Northern and Southern Protectorates in 1914 was not a mistake. I believe strongly that this nation is destined to be one great, united country, modeling unity in diversity to Africa and the world. This was why our founding fathers did not all rest their tents at their initial cynical standpoint, but went beyond this in due course to fashion the frameworks of a Nigerian nation, however imperfect, bequeathing, as it were, the responsibility of carving a more perfect nation to subsequent generations. It was why they navigated the ethnic and religious potholes as they embarked on rigorous deliberations on how the imagined nation should be governed. It was why they undertook the constitutional journey from Richard's Constitution of 1944 to Macpherson Constitution of 1951, from Littleton Constitution of 1954 to the Independence Constitution of 1960, and ultimately to the Republican Constitution of 1963. The good report obtained by these founding fathers and the expression of faith should be to us a cloud of witnesses as we embark on the rebuilding process. First, about Macaulay, a father of Nigerian nationalism, who began to organize for Nigeria's independence, fell terminally ill as he undertook a pan-Nigerian tour with the National Council of Nigeria and the Cameroons, NCNC. His last words on his deathbed should inspire patriotism even among generations unborn. He said, "Tell the National Council delegates to halt wherever they are for 4 days for Macaulay and then carry on. Tell Oged was his abbreviation for Ogedegbe's son, to keep the flag flying." Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, arguably the foremost nationalist in Nigeria's independence struggle, said in 1960, "As a young man, I saw visions Visions of Nigeria becoming a great country in the emerging continent of Africa. Visions of Nigeria offering freedom to those in bondage and securing the democratic way of life to those who have been lulled into an illusion of security under colonial rule. I trust that I shall dream my dreams amid the peace and ever-increasing prosperity of the people of my native Nigeria. The motto of the Independent Federation of Nigeria is unity and faith. I pray that we may guard our unity and keep our faith. What further moved me to tears in the video of Tafawa Balewa's visit to the United States was his changed position on the workability of a Nigerian nation, having been molded by exposure, tempered by experience, and made wiser by statesmanship. These pillars were manifest in an inclusive constitutional process that became the social contract by which Nigerians dictated the terms of their relationship with their elected leaders, and that was documented in an independent constitution and its 1963 amendment that had legitimate claim to the phrase, "we the people." These are the pillars whose horns we must weep over. Indeed, weeping is where the rebuilding begins, and weeping we have done. From the wailing of the mother in the north, whose son and husband have been felled by Boko Haram's reign of terror, to the groaning of the household in the south, whose breadwinner is held between life and death in the den of kidnappers, to the sighing of the university student who must spend 5 to 8 years completing a 4-year course because of incessant strikes and will eventually graduate without skills that can favorably compete in a rapidly globalized market, to the anguish of the businessman or woman in the north, south, east and west, whose business is crumbling under the weight of an awkwardly structured monoproduct economy and infrastructural decay. Indeed, Nigerians have wept and are weeping. And not only have we wept, we have also prayed. We have prayed in churches and home gatherings. We have prayed in mosques, in the city streets. We have prayed on campgrounds, on expressways. We have prayed on mountains and in the countryside. And not only that, we have also taken a public stand. We have marched and we have protested. We have marched in defense of our Constitution. We have marched in protest against power hijack. We have marched in protest against fuel price hike. We have marched on the streets of Abuja. We have marched on the streets of Lagos. We have marched on the streets of Kano, Port Harcourt, Ibadan, Enugu, and in many cities in the country. The time now has come for us to take our destiny in our hands. We are not stopping at praying and weeping and marching. We must now get set to rebuild and restore. We must retrieve what is remaining of the pillars of our founding fathers, and we must restructure and reconstruct. We must rebuild from wall to wall, from gate to gate, from community to community, and from city to city, and from region to region, until the whole nation is restored to its former and even greater glory. I do not see why we cannot have 6 Dubais in the 6 geopolitical zones of Nigeria, because the resources are there if there's a willing mind and able hands. That's why we must seize every given opportunity to reason together and sincerely talk. Above all, we must walk the talk. Not to do so may be suicidal for our nation. I leave you with the words of Chief Obafemi Awolowo, who obviously did not continue to see Nigeria as a mere geographical expression. Hear him. It's a duty that we hold to our great dear motherland, to enhance her and to boost her in the eyes of all the world. Egalitarianism is our national watchword. Equality of good fortune must be to each sure reward. Liberty and brotherhood are the goods for which we'll strive, plus progress, plus plenty, and all the good things of life. Up, up Nigeria, and take your rightful place. It is your birthright and destiny. Africans leading life to be. That vintage Awo, the revered president, best president Nigeria ever had.